there, all you Brandon's World listeners. So this interview was recorded on Saturday, March 8th, 2025, prior to the start of NFL free agency, prior to any of the Myles Garrett news, prior to any of the Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf news, any other NFL moves, the Josh Allen contract extension, etc. So we are not going to be covering any of that on today's show, but this is still such a great interview that I wanted you to hear it. And so without further ado, let's get into today's Brandon's
With
World.
all this Commanders news hitting me now, it's just been nuts because I think that there's a lot of room to grow with this team, especially. And I know we'll talk about them here in a second, but overall, I'm doing pretty great. I'm excited. Let's go ahead and get to it because I can't wait to talk about stuff.
Yeah, so last week I was on Austin's show, the Austin Arnold Show. It's a dedicated Washington Commanders podcast. I'll put the link to it in the description on video and audio. So I'm not going to rehash anything that we talked about last week, Austin, but after we got done recording, basically, Debo Samuel becomes a member of the Washington Commanders, and everybody that Brandon's World knows my hatred for not just Debo in general, but I think it mostly comes from the San Francisco 49ers. I don't like that team. I don't like that organization at all. Debo was part of it. I told you on your show that the Commanders needed to get a number two wide receiver. I think they did that. I still think there's obviously some room to grow, and I think you could even add another receiver to that core. But just your thoughts on the move in general.
So on my show, I talked about how I thought Debo wasn't the guy I'd want, but then obviously when the deal goes down, you're ecstatic. And I think the familiarity with Adam Peters really much says it all. Because with Adam Peters coming over from San Fran, I'm now starting to get this feeling that he wants to build it like San Fran. And I'm fine with that because San Fran for a good amount of years, they've been competitive and they still are, but now they're kind of going through that reset. So I don't know how they're gonna look. But with that being said, I'm very excited for what Debo brings to this offense because all those screen routes that De'Ami Brown was running last year, Debo Samuel is going to be doing that and more. He's going to be great in the intermediate and short game. I don't think he's going to necessarily be used as a running back too much because they want to make sure his body is maintaining and staying great the way it is. I think adding carries as a running back may kind of hurt him and maybe get him in a position where he's not as healthy. So I think that with this Debo move, you add a lot of flexibility to the offense. You add a weapon to a quarterback who knows that he can get the ball to his players and they can make plays. It's an all-around good move. And I think the thing that I like about the move the most, Brandon, is that you're only paying a fifth for 17 million.
Yes.
That is so low risk. That's low risk, high reward, right?
Yes.
Because if Debo is playing great, you can extend him. It's not like I don't think they don't want to extend him. I think they want to make him earn an extension. And that's why Adam Peters is saying, listen, we have this extension dangling over your head. If you play really well, I know you play real well. I know you're a good guy in the locker room because I saw it in San Francisco with all those years with John Lynch. If we know what you can do and you can translate it to Washington, we'll give you an extension and we'll make you a part of this team moving forward. But for a fifth round pick to take on 17 million, you can't beat that. That's a hell of a move.
Yeah, so I think my biggest problem with Debo is not that, he constantly ran over my Philadelphia Eagles when he played him when he was in San Francisco. I never understood this wide back mentality. I never have understood it, in my opinion. I don't like the fact when guys try to play essentially two different positions at once. Well, guy get running backs and sometimes split out wide, obviously, and be a slot receiver. But it feels like to me like being a receiver and being a running back in pro football is so hard. And these guys spend time and they dedicate themselves to the craft. So it feels like to me, when you're going from one position to the next, you're trying to be both and you're trying to get paid. It's like, it's very weird because you don't even know what you are. And I think offenses try to, make Debo happy. I think Shanahan tried to move him around a little bit too much in San Francisco. I think if he, like you said, I think, we talked about on your show, I think they're going to upgrade from Brian Robinson at running back. I think if you get a better back and you sort of let Tebow be that number two wide receiver, and then occasionally, maybe you give him a jet sweep or, You give him some of those tosses or whatever. But if you're going to have him line up in the backfield 10, 15 times a game, to me, that's not what you're paying him for.
Exactly. And I don't want them to do that. And again, with full transparency, whatever Cliff Kingsbury does to this offense, I will trust him because we saw it last year. He did pretty well. Even when he was in that lull in the middle of the season, he was able to make adjustments, something that he rarely did in Arizona. And
That
people
was his knock in Arizona.
exactly. And this time around, he made his adjustments and he got this team to an NFC championship game. So my hope, like we kind of just talked about, if you're going to have some running back packages for him, make it very seldom. I don't want him 10 to 15 times lined up in the backfield. You have to preserve his body. He's getting near 30. He's 29 right now. You have to make sure you have him for as much time as you can on that field and you can maximize his usage. And those jet sweeps, like you talked about, that'd be perfect a couple times a game. But do not line him up in the backfield all the time. It's not going to work. At that point, you're making him a running back, and we know how their shelf lives are.
So your team re-signed Bobby Wagner and they just let Jonathan Allen go. Your thoughts on some of the moves on the defense side of the ball and where you think they go in free agency in the drafts? Because I think that's the side of the ball that obviously is still a work in progress.
Bringing Bobby Wagner back is like a foregone conclusion because you have Jordan McGee in the wings, and he never really played last year, really because of injury. So bringing a bona fide first ballot Hall of Famer like Bobby Wagner back, who knows the entire system, knows Dan Quinn, knows Ken Norton Jr., the linebackers coach. I mean, it's just a no brainer. And he even said in the press conference yesterday when I was listening, he's like, this is where I wanted to be. He didn't really think about going anywhere else because he loved being in Washington so much and he just loved the culture and what we were building. He said specifically there is unfinished business, and I tend to agree with that point there. So I think bringing Bobby Wagner back was perfect. As for Jonathan Allen, it sucks because he was a stalwart in the community for so many years. He was one of my favorite players for a long, long time. And I genuinely feel bad that he had to stick through those House of Horror years with Dan Snyder being the owner, with the team not being good. And then this past year, he goes down with the pec injury. And you're thinking to yourself, man, is this really how it goes out? Because the writing was on the wall when they drafted Jerzon Newton in the second round. We kind of thought that one of these two defensive tackles in either Deron Payne or Jonathan Allen were going to go. And with John Allen officially being released yesterday, it sucked. Like, it's someone like him who I really wish had better years in DC because he did not deserve all the other stuff that a normal player on a normal team, like I guess let's throw in like Philadelphia, where there's no ownership, black cloud over that organization. He did not deserve any of that. He went to Stonebridge High School in Virginia. He's a local kid. I wish him nothing but the absolute best wherever he goes. I wish him nothing but success. But at the end of the day, the production for his age, you don't want to pay a guy $16.4 million for that production not to match up. And you know, they're doing right by the veterans. They're doing right by the players now. They gave him an opportunity to try and find a trade partner. It didn't work. Now he has an open market, and it sucks. But with that being said, I think there's going to be some defensive upgrades, and I look at cornerback in the free agency class as something that they attack.
I think the hard part about, and I think this is what teams are looking at. So this year, it's the weird year where so free agency does not have that big a name. So no matter what position you're looking at, I think it's one of the reasons why the Bears went out and they traded for two offensive linemen. Because typically, right, offensive linemen are the ones that sort of get moved in free agency in the draft. And they just said, well, this class is good, but it may not be that high level. And I see that across the board, whether it's in free agency, whether it's in the draft. So I look at free agency this year in general. And I think, like, outside of the big QB movement that we're going to get to here in a little bit, I think we're going to see a lot of teams maybe sort of sit on their hands and wait for that quote unquote second wave of maybe the lower tier guys, like a Zach Bond who went to Philadelphia last year, and you're going to try to hit on some of these guys for a lower discount of money.
Yeah, and Washington did that last year. If we're going to compare apples to oranges, they signed a lot of years. They signed a lot of guys to a 1 year deal,
Yeah.
specifically Jeremy Chin, Bobby Wagner. Those were two of them. Bobby Wagner played well enough to get another contract extension. I'm still waiting for the Jeremy Chin news. I think he might try to test the market because, you know, he almost had like a career renaissance last year.
Yeah.
Like the reason why he was not going back to Carolina was because of injuries, and it was because he could not stay on the field. Last year, he stayed on the field for pretty much every game, and he looked like an all pro. So it's like, I feel like Washington's going to do the same thing again this year in terms of free agency. I can see a Talisi Hufanga come into DC if they don't get a guy like Jeremy Chin back, because Jeremy Chin might try to get more money somewhere else. I could totally see that happening. I could just see Washington bringing in a Charvarius Ward, who I really really want. Even though he had a tough year last year, it was a lot of personal off the field issues. His daughter died. I'm pretty sure. I
Yeah.
think that it would be best for him to go somewhere else. And I'm saying right now, DC, because Adam Peters knows the guy. He knows who he was in the building, and I think he just needs a fresh restart. In terms of the draft for Washington, I'm just going to make this disclaimer right now. You pick 29. I don't know if there's anyone good enough to pick at 29. I would just trade down and get more assets. You only have 5 picks.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. So, we talked a lot about the Super Bowl and the Eagles and the Commanders and the outlook on your show. So I'm going to let the viewers go there to talk about, sort of your thoughts on the NFC Championship game and the whole offseason and the wrap up this Commanders segment of the show. I wanted to dedicate to the recent news, which, speaking of recent news, it sort of came down at the time of this recording on March 8th that yesterday, Myles Garrett reportedly had reached out to the Browns owner Jimmy Aslam, who denied him a meeting. Jimmy Aslam reportedly told him to go to Andrew Berry, talk about the trade thing. Listen, me and you both talked about it on your show. We think Myles Garrett needs to be traded. We think he should be traded. Whether or not he will be traded, I think again the Browns should do it. I don't know at this point if they will do it, but we're both Browns. I call us observers. We live in the Cleveland area. I feel like we speak more truth about the Browns than Brown fans, and Brown fans that we know hate when we talk about the Browns because they don't think we know anything. When in reality, we know more than they do. Um, your thoughts on the whole situation and what's going on with Myles Garrett?
The longer they wait, the longer it's going to take for them to realize that they're losing value, right? And I think for the Myles Garrett deal, if you do not trade him by the draft, you realize you've just shot yourself in the foot in terms of getting the max capital that you could possibly get for him.
You have
I
to get at least two first. I think we both agree on
have
that.
Yeah, you need to get two first. And for Myles Garrett, it says a lot about Jimmy Haslam in my eyes if you're not willing to take a meeting with the best player on your roster who has publicly said, I don't want to be here. Now, the new CBA makes it hard for Myles Garrett to have leverage, and it sucks that that's the case because it's not like the NBA where players have leverage all the time and they can kind of exercise their rights.
See, I
But
actually like that. I like the fact that the NFL players don't run the asylum, quote unquote. That's just me.
yeah, and to each their own. I mean, I kind of like it to an extent, but when you're on a team that's in purgatory like Myles Garrett, you can only feel so bad for the guy. Like at the end of the day, he signed the contract extension. He has 2 more years left on that deal. And for Myles, the longer this keeps going, if the Browns keep this stance and you are prepared to miss games, if the Browns are really that stubborn, I could see this playing out to them not letting this dude leave the building for 4 years and maybe have him not play a snap because
You
it just
you
seems like they're that adamant on not trading him right
you
now.
think this could turn into like a Le'Veon Bell situation that we saw in Pittsburgh?
It could, and it would be scary to think about, but if this goes post draft and he is not traded, Myles Garrett needs to think to himself, is this worth it anymore? Because if it's not, then you need to get on the field and play your contract out. And it would suck because I don't think the Browns are going anywhere. But you'd have to at least put some film on display for some of these other teams. And who knows? Again, maybe if the Browns go Abdul Carter at 2, that changes their opinion. If Abdul Carter's not there and they go quarterback, I think it's harder for them to get rid of him. But if Abdul Carter is there at 2 for the Browns, I think it's much easier for them to think we can get rid of Myles Garrett. The question is what is the compensation going to look like now that post draft has occurred?
So that's where I was going to go next. Let me ask you this question real quick. Do you believe, like I do, that in my opinion, there's no doubt about it, Cam Ward is going number one to Tennessee?
Tennessee is such an outlier because I've heard Mike Borgonzi go on the radio and say, "Oh, we really like what Abdul Carter's doing," and then like,
I think
yeah,
it's all smokescreen.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like we don't know if it's a smokescreen or not. It probably is. I just don't see a world where they go into next season saying Will Levis is the guy.
There's no, I
After
mean, Will,
last
I mean,
year, there's
the
no way.
Will Levis cost them, and I don't know if you remember this. You came on my show last year and said that you thought the Titans could surprise people. And I pushed back. I said, I like your take. The problem is their quarterback. And I said they were going to be, I thought the Washington Commanders, the year that you guys had Sam Howell, a team with good weapons that didn't win games because they didn't have a quarterback. And Will Levis literally cost them about 4 or 5 games last year. I mean, every week I would come on here and I would say, "Oh, well, Levis is starting for Tennessee. I'm betting against the Titans."
Yeah, and you're not wrong because that's exactly what happened. Like, just imagine if you put Cam Ward on that team or Shador Sanders or just any other quarterback. But for the sake of this argument, let's just say Cam Ward, right? You
Yeah,
put Cam Ward on that Tennessee Titans team last year, they probably could surprise people because I liked some of the skilled players that they had. I liked their defense a little bit more than the offense because they actually had decent players. But now they're in this rebuilding phase. They know that they got to kind of rebuild the team back up. And I think if you are going to get a no nonsense guy, like someone that you don't have any red flags about, it's definitely Cam Ward. Now, I have said publicly I would take Shador over him, but now that these concerns and red flags are coming out, is it really worth the gamble? And at pick one, I just don't think you can do that gamble. I would just take Cam Ward, tell Will Levis, oh, it's a quote unquote competition, but you know he's not going to be the quarterback. Hell, I would maybe release him
I
if the
I
writing's
think
on the
I
wall at
think
that
you would
point.
trade him to a team that needs a big, me. I don't know who, like a Buffalo, somebody where he could just back up Josh Allen. For
Yeah, he's got
example,
to
I
be
don't
behind
know.
a veteran and learn.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw my NFL minute to win it QB version. I know we talked about it a little bit on your show. I did have the Browns not taking a quarterback. I do have them taking a Duke Carter at number two. Now people are saying that the fact that they're working out Shador Sanders and all this stuff, that it does feel like, their stance on Garrett, it does feel like that they're gonna be all in on Shador. I just, I get the perspective of like, we need a quarterback, we need to change the face of the franchise. And I just don't think Shador's the guy. And maybe this is an underwhelming thing for me. I do not want, and I don't even know if it's going to be a factor or not, but I don't even want the chance of having Shador, Dion, the drama here. Like, Cleveland just needs a no drama, no nonsense. The roster is so bad that I almost feel like you do like a San Francisco or even a Washington, where it's like, let's build the roster first and then insert the quarterback.
Yeah, like I think if you're at two and you want that no nonsense approach, which I think the Browns should take at this point, you just got to go for best available. And I think that amidst all the Myles Garrett rumors, you kind of got to go pass rusher. Abdul Carter is arguably the best player in this draft, but you could say that about five other people, and I'd believe you, like a Travis Hunter and like a Cam Ward and like God, I just said Abdul Carter. So I just lost my train of thought. But you know what I'm trying to say. I think if the Browns, if they kind of
It's
take
a
a
lot
walk,
of it's a good tackle draft too. Like, and I've said this too. Like, obviously, Vegas just made the move for Geno Smith that we'll get into. But like, what if Vegas decides, hey, we want to move up. Geno's going to be our bridge, but we want to go get Shador for the future. What if the Browns decide, hey, we'll move back from 2 to 6. We'll get an extra pick. You take a tackle and then you go out, you can get an edge rusher in the second or third round because it is a very deep edge rusher draft. Like that's another scenario too that I don't think a lot of people are talking about.
if the Browns are serious about not winning and they want to build their roster, they would trade back without a doubt.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the best. You have like they finally have like a first round pick for the first time in a couple years, and
Yeah.
they finally have a chance to kind of right their wrongs after in my opinion, the worst deal in history of the NFL.
By the way, I think
All
like
around.
like Vegas to me is the team. Like I think, I don't think the Giants are gonna move up from 3 to 2. I don't think Jacksonville would move up. I don't think New England would move up. So to me, Vegas is the team you look at and you go, do we go from 2 to 6? Maybe, in my opinion, you get maybe an extra third this year and a second. You swap first round picks, you get an extra third and a second. Start your rebuild because the offensive line is a mess. And we all know the defensive line's a mess. We all know they need another receiver, like they need a lot of help. Let me ask you though quickly about, did you see this rumor yesterday that this Arizona sports radio host put out about Kyler Murray?
I did, and I didn't buy it because it's like, why would they try to shop Kyler Murray to the Browns or just any other team in general? Because, in my opinion, Kyler Murray was not the problem in Arizona last year. I thought
No.
Arizona did pretty decent last
Yeah.
year, and they're a well coached team. They just need a couple more pieces, and especially with how the NFC West looks now, after what Seattle decided to do, which makes no sense to me at all, and we'll get into that.
Okay.
But what they're doing, and then you have San Fran, who's like resetting their team, and then
Even
you have
though,
the Rams, who we know about the Rams. Like,
and who knows what's going on with Brock Purdy in San Francisco? I mean, what that deal is going to be. And the Rams to me are a weird team. So, I've been telling people, Austin, the Rams are weird to me because every year for like the last 3 years since they won the Super Bowl, they come out every offseason and they go, yeah, we might move off Stafford. We need to get younger. We need to rebuild. And then they just run everybody back.
yeah, they run it back. And if you look at what happened last year, like, let's be honest, the Jalen Carter play at the end of the game
Save the season.
yeah, exactly. It saved the season. Even you can say that.
Save the
For the
season without a
Rams,
doubt.
they were this close to going to the NFC Championship
But
game,
that's what
and
great
then you want to
players
sit
do
here and
as
do all
well.
this hoopla. It just makes no sense to me. It like
Yeah.
run it back. Like you don't have to bring Cooper Cup back. That's fine. You can get younger at receiver, sure. But like to just completely wipe out the majority of your roster to me and like some of your more important pieces makes zero sense after literally what you just did last year.
So now, I said on your show, I thought the Giants were going to go after Matthew Stafford. I don't know what they do now. Do they go after Rodgers? I mean, that to me, I mean, are they just going to let Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams stay in New York and play for the other team? Like, what do they do? They cannot draft. In my opinion, Joe Shane and Brian Dable, you've heard me say this. I don't think they're going to draft a rookie quarterback because they have to win this year.
We are now in the phase of the clock where like it's just they're ticking, it's ticking right now, and it's ticking, and now they're in like that Jets like time frame where it's like if you were Harry Douglas, you're like, oh, we got to win now. Let's go get Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers. That's what Joe Shane's doing right now. I think they're gonna go get Aaron Rodgers. They're gonna go get Devontae Adams. They're gonna underperform. They'll be better, but they'll probably win like 6 games at most. They'll get fired. They'll go somewhere else, and then the Giants will realize we just wasted a bunch of time.
You know
So
what though, Austin? I gotta tell you again. We've laughed at the Giants for years, but if you think about it on paper, their offensive line is very good. Their
yeah,
defensive line is very good. You add Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, who I don't care how they looked at the end of last year, he played well towards the end of the year. You add them with a Malik Neighbors, on paper, it's really not a bad team. Like, could they compete with Dallas and win 7, 8 games? I actually think on paper you can talk yourself into it.
yeah, but we were talking ourselves into it with the Jets. I feel like, and like,
Oh, I was talking, and
yeah,
I mean, we
I
talked
talked
about it over the
myself into that
summer.
too.
We
Like,
we both thought, and I thought Buffalo was going to take a step back, and they take a step forward. So what the hell do we know? Um,
exactly.
so let me talk about this. You mentioned the Geno Smith Seattle thing. Going from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold is a lateral move. It makes absolutely no sense. Now, I will say this. Starting at the beginning of the year, I did predict Sam Darnold to have a breakout year because he had Kevin O'Connell, because he had Jefferson, Addison, Aaron Jones, DJ Hawkinson, he had all the weapons. You go from that offense with that offensive minded head coach to a team with no longer Tyler Lockett, supposedly DK Metcalf's on the move. I like Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I don't know yet if he's a true number one receiver. And you're going to go with a defensive head coach in Mike McDonald and an offensive line that's not great. Sam Darnold will regress back to Carolina, New York Jets. Sam Darnold.
I don't know what Seattle's doing. They were just 10-6 last year. They were literally the only reason why they didn't make the playoffs was because of like I think it was like the strength of schedule or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was
It
like
was
the
some
fifth
small
tiebreaker.
it was like some small tiebreaker in the rule book, which is why they didn't make it in the playoffs. But like what the hell are they doing? Like, I have no idea. I thought Gino was serviceable. He was winning you games. And now with DK Metcalf wanting a trade, maybe with the whole DK Metcalf wanting a trade, they kind of figured, you know what, we're just going to reset this thing because I think he's gone now. DK Metcalf is going to be somewhere else. I think JSN will be the only guy on that offense outside of Kenneth Walker who will be like decent. See, I don't know what Seattle's doing because San Fran's imploding. We don't know what the Cardinals, we don't know what the Rams half the time. And now you're deciding with the defensive head coach who you went at so hard last year because you thought that he was the reason why your team wasn't making the playoffs. So then you get a defensive coordinator coach, a younger guy, like they called him the defensive Sean McVay. And
And
now
by the
it's
way, their defense was not good last year. Like I
exactly.
kept saying it. Like he's a defensive coach, and I clearly the players did like playing for him. I mean, they did win 10 games, but it sort of felt like it was more on the offense. And like, here's my thing about Geno Smith. He's like you said, he's serviceable, but he was what 35 years old. Like to me, he's a bridge quarterback at this point. And the problem Seattle's in, and I think they realize it, but they don't know how to fix it, is we have a good enough roster to win games, but we're not nearly close enough to win the Super Bowl. So it's like, what the hell do you do? You are a quarterback away, but how do you get a tough quarterback without trading for a tough pick? And maybe they use DK Metcalf to do so.
Yeah, I think if you're Seattle, you're trying to send DK Metcalf, in my opinion, to a team like Green Bay. Because I
Okay.
think if you send him to Green Bay, I get it's in the conference, I get all that, but Green Bay needs a wide receiver one. Now, they have said in rumors that they want a young receiver in return. So are you willing to part ways with a Romeo Dobbs or a Dontavian Wicks? I
I
think
would
they
like a
could.
Christian Watson for Seattle to pair up with Njigba. I think that would be a good move for
And I
them.
think and I think that would be all right for them. The only concern would be if you do get a Christian Watson, you got to understand the injury history.
Yes.
And then you can leverage that by saying, we're going to take a guy who has injury history, but we want a better pick too. And I think that they could do that to really try and maximize what they're getting. But if you're Seattle, you have to now find a partner who is willing to kind of shell out and say that, hey, we're willing to take on the contract.
Yeah.
We're willing to pay. We know we might be a receiver or two away, but this would be a step in the right direction. For me, I think the writing is so on the wall for him to go to Green Bay. I think it just makes too much sense. Green Bay they have not had a wide receiver once since Devontae Adams was there.
Yeah.
And I get Jaden Reed is good, but in a division now where you have to line up with the new look Bears, with Ben Johnson, the Lions, who are there. I don't know how Minnesota will do this year. I think they'll be all right. I think they'll be good, but not as good as they were last
It
year.
depends on who their quarterback is. I mean, are they going to go with JJ McCarthy? I'm hearing Daniel Jones rumors, which I mean, I'll be honest, if it's in Minnesota, like if Daniel Jones doesn't work there, he's not going to work anywhere. But like I don't know what they're going to do. I think Green Bay does make sense. I agree with you. I just think, I just thought about this. I wonder if last year's draft, Seattle planned on taking Michael Penix. And when Atlanta jumped up to get him, they said, "Oh fuck, we're fucked," and they didn't have a backup plan because it feels like it.
Yeah, and I liked Penix going to Seattle last year too. I think I said that in like the pre-draft process.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah,
I think
I think
everybody said it.
Seattle.
It fit right. His
Yeah,
offensive coordinator was there, and now Ryan Grubb didn't work out as OC. But who knows if it was a different story with Penix. I'm hearing all the Sam Darnold rumors are out there, the Daniel Jones rumors are out there, the Justin Fields rumors are out there. Like it's like the fact that all these guys, right? Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, they even a Kirk Cousins outside of Atlanta last year were not high commodities. So to me, it really does. It feels like a reek of desperation from some of these teams.
yeah. And getting back to Seattle just a little bit here, if you're going to go after Sam Darnold, you better I don't want to say go all in because that feels like
Like
it's really
if I was
contradictory.
them, I'd rather go after Justin Fields. Right? He's
Yeah.
younger, mobility. I'll tell you what. I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't even mind if Pittsburgh lets go of Russell Wilson. Do you call Russ for a 1 year reunion? Like
Oh
I think
man.
that makes more sense than paying Sam Darnold $45 million.
It would make more sense because I think Russ would be open to the idea now that Pete Carroll's not there.
Yes.
And I think that if Russ knows he doesn't have too much left in the tank, you go back there for 1 year, maybe two, depending on how you feel. Because I don't know, Seattle is in the circle of mediocrity, and it just mind boggles me at this
And like,
point.
do they take a shot then at like a Jackson Dart or somebody in the draft?
You'd
Like,
have to.
yeah.
You have got to have an insurance policy for your future. And they have not done that in an X amount of years. When they let Russ go to Denver, which was a great trade on their part, it was a good move. They clearly won it because Denver cut him a year later.
Yeah.
So when you go and do that and you make Geno Smith the guy, and now you've traded Geno Smith away, there has got to be an insurance policy for the future. And if you are not willing to say at some point we have, like, if it doesn't work with Darnold, or if it doesn't work with any other bridge quarterback that we get in here, you have got to blow it up. Look yourself in the mirror and blow it up. Every team has to do it, and I'm talking to the Pittsburgh Steelers too because they don't
Yeah.
do this too. Look
Oh,
yourself in the mirror,
we're
blow it
over
up,
500
go
for
from there.
17 years. That's all we care about. Yeah, whatever. I don't even want to talk about
Every
Pittsburgh.
team has had to rebuild at some
Yes.
point in
Yes.
their
Even the
lifetime.
Packers. I mean, what's
Exactly.
yeah. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.